Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Reality Vibes, where facts speak louder than feelings, and we don't apologize for common sense. Today, we are diving into a topic that every parent, teacher, and legal guardian should care about: how screen time actually plays out in real life, especially when rules like grounding come into play. This isn't some theory cooked up in a lab. This is first-hand data from a real household, backed by real research and observed without filters. We are not here to panic about technology or romanticize parenting. We are here to look at the numbers, study the behavior, and face the reality of how digital habits form and how they fight back when we try to cut them off. Let's break it down. This is my research presentation for ENC 1102 titled Grounded and Glued: Measuring Screen Time and App Usage Day by Day. I created this project based on real data I collected at home, and my goal is to show how screen time shifts, not just in quantity but in behavior, when kids and teens are grounded. This isn't some random theory. It is something I observed personally and backed up with serious academic research. Let me show you what I found. So, what exactly was I trying to figure out? Simple. I wanted to know how grounding affects screen time and app behavior among adolescents, and how those changes differ depending on age. To explore this, I observed two subjects from the same household. Subject A is 17 years old, a high school student already developing her own digital habits and social life. Subject B is 12, still very much in the preteen gaming and 100% game-related YouTube content zone. Both were grounded during the study, which gave me a natural way to compare how their behavior changed under the same rules. I didn't interfere or warn them. I just observed and tracked everything silently. To track the digital behavior, I use tools that are already built into the platforms they use. For subject A, I use Apple Screen Time Feature, which gives you a breakdown of app usage and screen categories. For subject B, I use Google Family Link, which is the Android equivalent, at some extent, of course. Every day, I took screenshots showing how much time they spend on their devices and which apps they use the most. Then I saved those images, sorted them by date, and later visualized them using Excel. Since the subjects didn't know I was doing this, their behavior was totally authentic. So there was no fake changes just to look good. I also observed how they acted throughout the day, whether they seemed stressed, irritated, or tried to sneak around the restrictions. All of that was part of the data. Now, let's connect this to academic research. One of the key studies I used was by Nagara and colleagues, published in 2025 in Pediatric Research. What they found was that the way parents behave with their phones matters just as much as the rules they set. For example, when parents constantly use their phones around their kids, those kids are more likely to show addictive screen habits themselves. They also discovered that allowing screens during meals or inside bedrooms leads to more social media and gaming issues. One of the most interesting points was that using screens as a punishment or reward actually makes things worse, especially with video games. But here is the good news. When parents do set firm boundaries and monitor their kids' use, the negative patterns go down. So it's not about banning tech, it is about smart, consistent parenting. That aligns with what I saw in my own household. Both subjects are always allowed by their permissive mother, who is my sister, by the way, to use their devices both inside the bedroom and during meals. In fact, they're allowed everywhere. The only place they are all away from the devices is at school, and that's only because the school's administration has the rule in place. That's it. They use the devices all the time and everywhere. Even when we go out to a restaurant, a supermarket, a science museum, or a movie theater, everywhere. Both girls have tripped and nearly fallen down the stairs in our house. On more than one occasion, staring like dazzled insects at the screen of their tablets or cell phones as they descend the steps. So both subjects match perfectly with this particular study. Also, the mother is glued to her own phone as well. So there you have it, a perfect match. Like you guys say here in America, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, or like mother like daughter, runs in the family, sheep off the old block, cut from the same cloth. And in Cuba, we just have de tal palo tal astilla, which means from such a stick, such a splinter. Anyway, we don't choose family, and it is what it is. So let's continue. Another source that helped shape my understanding was a nationwide study by Victoria Rideout, known as the Common Sense Census, published in 2015. This report surveyed over 2,600 kids between the ages of 8 and 18. What she found, even back then, is that screen-based activities were already dominating young people's lives, with TV, video games, and social media leading the way. She also showed that tweens and teens use screens differently. Tweens lean toward entertainment and games, while teens shift more towards social interaction, messaging, and content creation. The report also pointed out how screen time varies depending on family income, race, and education level. In other words, screen habits are shaped by more than just age, they are shaped by your own environment. This made me more aware of the different forces at play in my own observation. The next source I used was a 2024 study, also by Nagata and his team, published in BMC Public Health. This study followed over 9,500 adolescents for 2 years, a serious long-term look at how screen time impacts mental health. The key takeaway: more screen time, especially through texting and social media, was linked to a gradual decline in mental well being, particularly for girls. Passive scrolling, like endlessly flicking through feeds, had more negative effects than active use like FaceTime or group chats. What made this study even more powerful was that the results held true even after adjusting for things like sleep habits and previous mental health status. So when we say screen time, we really had to ask what kind and how is it being used? That message was loud and clear in both the research and in what I observed. To round out the research, I pulled in from a 2023 systematic review by Santos and colleagues, published in DMC Psychology. This one looked at more than 50 peer-reviewed studies on screen time and adolescent mental health. The conclusion was solid. When kids spend more than 3 hours a day on screens, especially for entertainment or multitasking, they face higher risks of anxiety, depression, and low self-esteem. Again, girls were more vulnerable in most of the data. The review emphasized that screen duration alone isn't enough to predict problems. What matters more is what kids are doing on screens, why they are doing it, and how involved their parents are. This source made me think about how different apps serve different psychological needs and how those needs play out under pressure, like when a kid is grounded, for example. This next slide shows you exactly how I gathered the data. Each day, I took a screenshot from both Apple Screen Time and Google Family Link. I labeled them with the date, the subject, and whether they were grounded that day. I store all the images in folders and then build graphs using Excel. This gave me both hard numbers and a clear visual map of behavior over time. It was like building a time lapse of their digital lives, one screenshot at a time. Now, let's take a closer look at some key trends of the subject A, the 17-year-old. Normally, almost 70% of her screen usage falls under the social category. And yes, the hours went down during the grounded period. Her overall screen time dropped dramatically, not just by a little, but to the point where most apps weren't being used at all. This wasn't just a dip, it was almost a full digital shutdown. WhatsApp and Instagram, which she normally uses daily, basically disappeared from the top activity list during that time. This suggests that the grounding wasn't just symbolic, it had real effects on her behavior. But what's interesting is that even though usage dropped, the categories that returned once the grounded ended were still social. That tells me that her digital habits didn't disappear. They were just paused. Obviously, as she is a 17 years old adolescent and the grounded only restricted device usage, not in-person interaction, it was pretty easy for her to circumvent the intent behind the punishment. She is at an age where digital restrictions don't necessarily control the full scope of her social life. If she wants to see someone, she can just walk outside, borrow a phone, or make plans at school. At this point, she's pretty much uncontrollable from a digital standpoint, especially considering that she will be legally an adult in just 2 months. That put us, parents and guardians, in a difficult spot because current punitive actions like removing phone access start to lose their impact. What replaces them now are more adult-style consequences: withholding car privileges, setting boundaries on financial support, stop funding her mobile phone plan, no more Uber rides, removing entirely the allowance, or limiting access to presents, gifts, and our personal property. That kind of things. Of course, we can still block or limit Wi-Fi access, confiscate gaming consoles or laptops that we pay for, revoke share purchases using family sharing, changing the password for our streaming platforms. But in grounding a teenager, almost adult but still dependent like her, isn't about controlling behavior with the screen anymore. It becomes a negotiation between two almost equal adults, with power shifting fast, really fast. This 3D pie chart breaks it down clearly. Social and communication apps dominated her usage, so her phone stayed with her as a tool for emotional connection. Entertainment and web browsing were there too, but they were minimal compared to the overwhelming need to stay in touch with others. You could literally see how central relationships were to her digital behavior before any kind of restriction. These were her go-to apps across all days: WhatsApp, Instagram, Messages, Camera, TikTok, and lastly, YouTube. The most telling part is that the top three were either social or communication apps. Now, once grounded, she didn't pivot to AI apps, reading apps, note taking, or anything educational. No, nothing like that. She just stopped using the phone, at least apparently. At that age, an adolescent feels ashamed being grounded. In her opinion, she's not an adolescent anymore, even when she still behaves like one. So her own personal pride and ego kicks off when grounded, and she says, "Oh my gosh, you are grounding me? Seriously? Okay, but I didn't want it anyway, so I'm not going to use it at all." Okay? And that's pretty hilarious if you think about it for a second. Now, let's turn to subject B, the 12-year-old gamer. This kid was a totally different story. Her total screen time did not go down when she was grounded. Instead, It just shifted. She moved away from her usual games and toward new tools like Polyboss AI, and she kept YouTube and TikTok in rotation after. This tells us something important. For younger kids, grounding doesn't necessarily limit behavior, it just redirects it, especially in kids with a complete digital addiction. If her bigger sister had access to a phone when she was 5, Subject B instead had a phone nearby even in her cradle. Her top apps were a mix of interactive AI, streaming, and short-form content. While the older Subject A wanted to connect with people, our Subject B just wanted to stay stimulated all the time. Her screen time was about distraction, not conversation. That difference was critical. What this really comes down to is emotional need. Subject A teenager, needed social validation. Her screen time revolved around connection. Subject B, still a child, wanted novelty and escape. She wasn't reaching out to people, she was reaching into apps. Grounding didn't reduce either subject's needs, it just influenced how that need show up on screen. Looking at this 3D chart of Subject A's app use, it is clear that the same platforms dominated throughout. Even when grounded, she didn't change which apps she opened, she just stopped using them during that period. That consistency points to deeply rooted social validation habits. In contrast, Subject B's chart shows more fluctuation. Her top apps changed more often, and she was more likely to experiment with something new. Her screen behavior seemed more impulsive, less pattern, and definitely more driven by curiosity than by connection. So, what did I actually learn from all this? First, grounding worked in reducing screen time, but only for the older teenager. Second, even when time dropped, app preferences stayed the same. Third, different age groups react to restriction in completely different ways. And finally, the conclusion in scholarly research, especially around content type and emotional context, match exactly what I observed in real life. Subject A used her phone mostly for WhatsApp and Instagram. That tells me she values staying plugged in with her social circle. When grounded, she just stopped using them and shifted to real life interactions. Subject B, on the other hand, spent most of her time more fairly divided among YouTube, TikTok, Polyboss AI, and Roblox. That's a combo of stimulation, creativity, and entertainment. And when grounded, she adapted and shifted to AI tools like Polyboss almost entirely. Same environment, same punishment, totally different outcomes. This chart shows again how consistent Subject A was. Her favorite apps didn't shift much. They were about social communication, period. It shows a kind of digital loyalty and honestly, maybe even a little resistance to change despite external pressure. Subject B, in contrast, changed lanes easily. She jumped from one platform to the next, always chasing something fun or novel. She wasn't trying to resist anything, she was just trying to keep entertained, grounded or not. To wrap it up, grounding isn't a magic fix. Sometimes it works, sometimes it just shifts behavior. But what stood out the most was how emotional needs, not just rules, drove app usage. Teens want to connect, kids want to play, and screens are where both of those things happen now. If we want to manage screen time responsibly, we need to stop thinking just in terms of hours and start thinking about what's actually happening during those hours. All the research in this project came from peer-reviewed academic sources. These include two studies by Nagata and colleagues. one by Victoria Rideout, and a major review by Santos. They gave me the context I needed to understand my own data from a scientific point of view. And finally, I just want to say this. This project wasn't just about numbers or graphs. It was about real behavior in a real home with real consequences. And I realized something important. Screens don't go away during punishment. They just shift shape. We are not just measuring tech use, we are measuring how young people cope, how parents react, and how digital habits are formed, even when rules are in place. That's why this research matters. And that's all for today, folks. You have been watching Reality Vibes, where facts speak louder than feelings. Take care of yourself. Stay sharp, stay free, and above all, stay real. Thanks for watching, and good night.